season did I talk about on the radio today? Fall. You guys, it's the 5th season. It's my most favorite season next to fall, spring, winter, and summer in that order. Canning season is called the 5th season. And a lot of people wonder why I would spend all this time canning. It's because then I take the entire winter off. All I have to do is open up jars and pour them into kettles and read and weave and do whatever fun stuff I want to do that way. So no one wins the first prize. We'll have to try again. The program airs on Thursdays in between 3:30 and 4. Usually Ashley and I have a wonderful conversation about food. It's a lot of fun and I love the platform. So I have lots of things to say today. I talk really, really fast. I have lots of stories to tell. I'm going to try to get through the basics here. So there's pencils and paper on your table. So write notes if you have me clarify anything. My only qualifications for being up here is the 2 things. I was raised in a local food system, and I have been doing this since the crack of dawn. And so I told Chandra, I said, I know more about canning than God, but Diane knows more than both of us. So, yes, everybody has to have a mentor. So, how many times have you heard this comment? You can't use a pressure cooker, you're going to blow yourself up. Right? Right, you've heard that before. Well, if you're smart, you won't blow yourself up. Pressure canning is so much fun. But there are some specific rules and guidelines that you need to be aware of to make sure that you don't poison yourself. Now, I'm sure that if you've ever gone to a canning class or a pressure canning class, you have heard this headline. 12 dying with death in Grafton farm home. Don't pressure can, you're going to kill your relatives. After some careful thinking and some research that I've done for the books I've written about the German-Russian food culture, I have come to this conclusion. What did they not have in 1930 that we have readily available to us today? Electricity. So we know first off that this woman did not can these green beans or peas with a pressure canner. She must have water bath canned them, which is what my grandmother did, and her mother, and probably my mother, who did not own a pressure canner either. What they did do was they boiled them for like 4.5 hours. And what do you have left from a pea after 4.5 hours in a water bath canner? You know, mush. So that is why I decided to take the giant leap and buy myself a pressure canner. Now, the basics are the same as far as the utensils and things that you use. Question number 2. These are 2 jars that I'm holding in my hand. Which one would you not use for canning? And why not? Very good. When was the last time you saw a glass mayonnaise jar? Like they don't put anything in glass jars like that anymore, do they? What you don't want to do is use these, especially for pressure canning, because what you're doing is you're increasing the temperature exponentially through pressure and steam in order to can low acid foods, meats, and beans. And so throw these away. Now, let's say you got a basement full of jars. They're Ball and they're Kerr or they're Golden Harvest, and you're thinking to yourself, it'd be great if Sue and Diane hadn't bought all the lids in January. You could find some canning lids, right? But seriously, if I didn't do farmers markets, it wouldn't be a problem to find canning lids. You don't want to reuse your lids, because if you go through all the work of prepping your food to put in either a water bath or a pressure canner, and the lids don't seal, you have accomplished nothing. And I think I'm hearing rumors that there are going to be lids available. However, because we prepare at our house for the zombie apocalypse, and we talk about it all the time, I have done two things to ensure that I will always be able to pressure can, provided we can get electricity from the windmill we're building. I can't guarantee that, but I have had in my personal stash 400 tattlers. And what tattlers are these nifty plastic lids that you can reuse because they seal with rubber rings, just like the ones did in the old days. These are totally reusable until they won't fit the lid anymore. So I have 400 tattlers and can whatever I wish because people leave jars on my doorstep all the time. Rummage sales, whatever, they're on my doorstep. So when you're using tattlers, there's a little bit of a different procedure in how you handle them in both a water bath and a pressure canner, but when they seal, they really seal. Like you can pop a regular lid off with the band, you cannot pop a tattler. The only thing bad about them is when you take them out of the water and you put them on your counter, they don't make that wonderful popping noise that other lids make. Then you're like, music to my ears, right? So I would recommend, these are the same price as lids were last fall. So if you're just canning for yourself, I would highly recommend that you pick up some tattler lids.
Where do you find them?
You can get them on Amazon, and I think Shields Hardware actually carries tattlers. I'll bet you Ace or Menards would actually probably order them for you also. I'm surprised at the few number of people that have actually heard of them. And I'm not sure if I got mine from Lehman's online because I order a lot of their other kind of gardening things.
So how do you use them?
Okay, so the one difference between a tattler and a regular lid is when you use a regular lid on a jar and you put the band on, first of all, but you do that to all your jars before you use them because you've got to make sure, first of all, they don't have any cracks in them, especially if you're reusing jars. You don't want any chips, and sometimes the new ones have little chips in too. But always make sure your jars are nice. You put your lid on, your regular lid like this, and tighten the band, not, don't muscle it, but tighten it tight, and then it will loosen up during the process. With a tattler, you just tighten them just enough to let them sit. And then when you pull them out of the hot water bath or the pressure canner, you really tamp them down. And they actually bulge up and they sink, just like a regular lid does.
They look like they're just a top. They don't look like a tight. So you like that rental too.
Yes, you have to use a band.
Oh yeah, but show me how.
I don't have a band handy. Do I?
Sue, would you repeat the question, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. She's wondering how we actually do this. So, do you have a wide mouth?
Oh, no, I have a regular.
You just put the band. She wants to know how to use the tattlers. You just put the rubber ring on the plastic and put it on the top of the jar. Here's what the old ones used to look like, with the thing on it. And so then what you're doing is you're using that as just like a regular lid would have that rubber in there. And I said they really do seal, and it might take a little practice, but I got my brother to start using them too, and he won't go back to regular lids anymore.
And then you put the ring on top.
Band on the top.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I misunderstood your question. So here's what you want to do. You've got the band on, you put your finger on there, you just turn the band on until it moves, and then stop.
Okay.
It does not have to be tight. And there are plenty of YouTube videos. When people call me up and they ask me a question, I'm so tempted to put the phone down and say, hang on while I Google that for you. There's so many good YouTube videos out there that you can always find a way to get something done.
You gotta stop one more minute, because I'm a little old.
Okay?
So there actually isn't a ring like a regular jar. You just put that on, the rubber on, that on, and you just turn it.
No, you use a band. Here.
During the water bath?
You always have to have a band to keep the lid on. We're gonna open these up. Okay, here's a regular lid. Okay, oh, let's use the
jar.
canning jar. Okay, so you put that lid on the top of the jar after it's been cleaned, and you tighten it, okay?
Yeah, okay.
Tighten it down,
I'm talking
right?
about the other
Okay, I'm just doing this as an example.
Thank you.
So, then with the tattlers, let me find a small one. You would put the rubber ring on, place that on top of the jar, and you would tighten it just that much so that it's on the top of the jar. And then when you pull them out of the canner, you cramp them down. And they will seal, well, we look at probably, the last time I ate sausage at my grandma's house, my dad walked out of the basement and said to my mom, "How long has that been down there?" And she said, 7 years, and we're still walking on the face of the earth. So, anyway, and you can come up afterwards and I will let you do it, okay? So, let's get back to canners now. One of the things, everybody should have a funnel to use when they're canning. Unless you have hands of steel, you should always have a jar lifter like this. And don't wait until you're 60 or so years old to purchase these things, okay? Like I spent my whole life sticking my hands in hot water when they make these handy little things that stick to lids so you can get them out of the water after they're warmed up, right? So, pressure canning is as safe as regular canning if you follow the guidelines. My All-American canner, which that's this baby right here, has a gauge on top, right here, that tells you when you're going to blow it up because it says caution on there. So, we don't want to go that high. Now, the thing that regulates this canner is this, I forgot what it's called. It's a shuttlecock or something like that, and it has 10, 15, and 5 on it. And that's 5 pounds of pressure, 10 pounds of pressure, or 15 pounds of pressure. So when you put your jars in here, there's water in the bottom, just like a regular canner. There's a rack in the bottom, just like a regular canner. Keeps the jars off the bottom. And I apologize, I did not clean this before I came because who's got time to do that? So, prepare your jars just like you would in a water bath situation. Actually, hot pack or cold pack will work. But what you want to can in a pressure canner are low acid vegetables like corn and peas and green beans. You can do tomatoes and salsas and jellies in a water bath canner because the high sugar content prevents them from spoiling and or the acid in the tomatoes. However, if you're doing something like a salsa, you should use an approved recipe, especially if you're a beginner canner, because anytime you create an imbalance between the acidic value that's in that jar by introducing low acid peppers or onions or whatever, you're creating an environment for botulism. And remember, botulism comes from the soil. So when you're prepping your vegetables and things for canning, you should really be making sure that you're using the best ever freshest vegetables. Either grow them yourselves or go to the farmer's market and get them straight off the farm and use the firmest and freshest vegetables. Don't can anything that's already moldy. You're just asking for trouble. And the reason the botulism grows in the low acid canning process is because you're creating the perfect environment for it if you're not careful about what you're putting in the jars and how you're processing them. So, another thing that I don't know if people, if you open up a jar of something and it doesn't look right, doesn't smell right, has mold on the lid, don't be sticking your finger in there and going, I think we shouldn't probably eat this tonight, because you're just asking for trouble, okay? So anyway, the process is basically the same, but I have a handout out there that will kind of run you a little bit through the differences. And that is that, okay, question number 2 for how about one of my cookbooks from German Russian country? Can anybody tell me what the altitude in Bismarck is? There, that's the closest one, the 1686. I looked it up and wrote it down somewhere. So here's your cookbook. Oh yeah, can you grab that for me? And the reason you want to know the altitude is because it affects the pressure in your canner. So the first thing you do is make sure that you know what the altitude is. And then my canner has this great book, but let me recommend Jackie Clay is a fabulous northern Minnesota backwoods canner. And this is an excellent resource. It's called Growing and Canning Your Own Food. She has a multitude of recipes in here, and she runs through the process. And she also tells you how to grow certain fruits and vegetables. So I really would recommend this book if you were going to try pressure canning. Secondly, I would also recommend an All-American Canner. Once again, because of the zombie apocalypse, you don't want a canner that has to have a rubber gasket around it. This one seals with a little bit of vegetable oil, which is kind of why it's a little sticky. So that way you don't have to worry about having to find a replacement part for this. And that's another reason why I use the weighted gauge when I do pressure canning, because that is less likely to go wonky on you. And you have to be careful that you're using the right amount of pressure and the right amount of canning time. So when you fill your canner and you tighten it down with these handy dandy little screws, then you start the water boiling. Now I have a new range that has a super hot burner on it. So you do not want to pressure can and take a nap or go to the grocery store. You want to stay in your kitchen, and that will prevent you from becoming the next Facebook post about why you shouldn't be pressure canning. So this is where this gauge fits. So once you load this up with the appropriate amount of jars and you bring it up to steam, you allow the steam to vent out of this hole here. Now something else you might want to do is make sure that that hole is open before you start canning by holding it up to the light and peering through it. So if you can see through it, you're probably good. But this canner also has this rubber thing here. It's a safety mechanism, so if it does get up too hot, then it will blow that. Now I'm not going to promise you it won't blow the lid off, because I've never had that happen to me. But anyway, it's possible. So then you vent this. You let it steam for 10 minutes or so to make sure that the whole canner is rocking and rolling. Same way when you're water bath canning. I have this great stainless steel canner that actually has a gauge on it with both altitude and the safe zone. Anytime you're canning, you want to bring something up to the rolling boil that you need for water bath and the proper steam and pressure for pressure canning. If it drops below the appropriate pressure at any time, then you must start all over again with your timing. So that's why you kind of need to supervise it. Once it's been vented, you take your little, whatever it's called, and you put it on there. Though it's weighted, and there's a word for it.
Weighted gauge.
And this thing will jiggle. And you want to turn your burner down, and you want to make sure that it only releases a poof of steam like 3 times in a minute. So you're once you've got that, and once you know what your burner is going to be set at, it works usually all the time. Should I wait for the train? Whoops. Anyhow, then you turn your burner down and make those adjustments so that in that 1 minute time you've got about 3 jiggles. Give or take, you know, like sometimes it's off a tiny little bit, but you need to still supervise that, because you have to maintain that particular heat and pressure at all times, and it will show on this gauge also. And then, I suppose the next really critical thing is, besides don't walking away, is that you want to start your timer, make sure you've got the appropriate time has passed, and then you turn your burner off. Now, another thing that we have this time in our lives are glass top stoves. There's been a lot of people that have asked me even about water bath canning and glass top stoves. It's perfectly safe. However, do not, and I will repeat this 100 times, do not open this up until it has completely cooled off and this temperature gauge goes down to 0. Do not even lift this off until it's close enough to 0 to safely remove this weight. You will burn yourself, but most importantly, if you open that canner up and the steam is released too soon, all the water is going to boil out of your jars and you will have nothing to show for it. And I'm speaking from experience. Because as you know, it's so exciting to be able to put those nice, beautiful jars on the table and see what you've canned. You can add about a tablespoon of vinegar to your water in both this instance and this instance, and that'll help keep your jars a little less greasy. But we always let them sit for 24 hours. And if you have a husband like mine who's never done a lot of this stuff, he's constantly picking up my jars and going like this. And I'm like, you've got to not touch my jars until they're completely cool. You want to make sure they seal, and then when they've sealed, you want to pull that band off and wash them. If you're going to store them in your root cellar or any place downstairs that might have some mice coming in once in a while in the wintertime, we put a metal muffin or cupcake holder, the metallic cupcake holders down. Then we put the band back on to keep the mice from eating the rubber rings. They love these things. And it took me a year to figure that out, going downstairs and thinking, why are these all unsealed? Well, they bite that and it opens up. However, if you don't have a rodent problem and you have a pantry that's cool and dark, you can remove the bands and just put the jars in there. Now something, you're never too old to learn things, right? Something I learned from my canner friend Diane is that she saves those old kind of not so beautiful bands and she puts those on instead of the new ones when she's canning. And then when she removes those, she puts the new ones on, so these never touch water. But we both sell at farmers markets, and so we try to make our canned goods look as beautiful and safe as possible. Trust me when I tell you this. If anybody gets sick from pressure canned food or regular canned food, you're going to mess my business up. So I'm begging you to please ask questions if you don't know what you're doing. It's not like the olden days when I would sit in the kitchen and watch my mom doing things. Now, back to the glass top stove. This is very important. One of the things you don't want to do with any of these canners is slide them across a glass top stove. That will scratch the surface, and that's what will cause that to break. If you just keep calm and let everything cool off, you should be just fine. And I had the guys carry this over. I'm getting so old, this thing seems like it's pretty heavy to me, so I always let it cool off and then I empty it out. The reason I bought this beautiful stainless steel canner about probably a year and a half ago, and I love this thing, it's absolutely fabulous, is another thing that you have to be careful about with a glass top stove is the bottom of your canner. A lot of these canners have this ridge in the bottom. This isn't bad, but I still gave this one up because of that. Some of them have a really deep ridge in it. It collects the heat. So you have excessive heat out here and not so much heat in the middle, and that will could cause cracking in your glass top stove. As well as when you have hot jars, and if you have like a granite countertop, it's cooler than a regular countertop most of the time. Don't set them directly on that countertop. They will crack, and there's nothing more devastating than having a jar crack, either when you're putting it in the canner or taking it out of the canner. So, I have some resources on the bottom of that sheet of paper that's on your table, and I think I pretty much went through everything except Daryl did ask me about canning sausage. Oh my gosh, if you've never had fry sausage canned, you just don't know what you're missing. Or canned chicken. That is safe to do in the pressure canner. You have to pressure can it, for 65 minutes or so, but all of that is in your canner instruction book. Now, just on a side note here, I went through my little thing, I have a cabinet with some little boxes in there, and I went through there and I think that I have every book from every appliance I've ever purchased in my entire life in that box. I finally threw a few out that I know I don't have those appliances anymore, but they make these for a reason, people. So this is a good resource for you to keep handy. And also, I do have like this canning book that from Better Homes and Gardens. Like, I love this book. I actually have 2 copies of it. One is newer and one is older. Extension has tons of approved recipes that you can use, and I would recommend doing that. Also, when I'm out talking about things in general, it's really great if you could find a mentor. Women used to get together and work in the kitchen, and I would sit and I would listen to my mom and my her best friend Gladys, and we would butcher chickens together, and they would freeze them together, and they would make Coogan together, and that's where I learned the aesthetic value of friendships with women and the beauty of being able to create your own food and fill up your root cellar. One last thing is this book called Batch. This is a fabulous book because not only does it tell you about canning vegetables, but it talks about drying vegetables and has billions of recipes in, so that if you have a glut of peppers, there's all kinds of things you can do with them. So this is a great book to have. Now, I don't have any other questions to ask. Oh wait, I do have another question to ask. Can somebody out there, for yet one more cookbook, tell me what newspaper carries my weekly column?
Garrison.
Oh my gosh, we got somebody from that part of the country. Would you like the Das Gutes Essen book?
I got that.
Okay, then how about the one from the church with all of my favorite mom's cookie recipes in it? That's awesome. Yes, I am actually a paid columnist now, and I'm so proud of that because now I can scratch everything off my bucket list. Does anybody have any questions?
Okay, so your book's Batch. Who's the author?
Joel McCharles and Dana Harrison. You're very welcome. And, oh, you have another question.
Yes. Okay, on your pressure cooker, you don't just trust the gauge, you want to watch both, because I usually don't watch the jigger as long as my gauge stays at 10 pounds.
That she wants to know if I watch the jiggler and the gauge. It says in the instructions that the gauge is correct when this thing jiggles about 3 times in a minute.
Okay.
So that's how I kind of judge whether we're up to pressure or not.
Okay. So then after you know this is.
Then you're pretty safe
then
to,
you just watch the gauge.
right.
Okay, thank you.
And I did, somebody asked me earlier about adjusting these gauges. Like, I'm very careful about how I store this and who touches my pressure canner, because the gauges could get knocked out of whack. Does Extension still check pressure canner gauges?
That's exactly what Haley's running me graph.
Okay.
So if the guys can watch for her.
Okay, good. I just wanted to double check that.
Yep.
Okay, more questions? Any questions?
So as far as sterilizing, like, I know usually they say just soak the jars in boiling water. I've heard some people say they just run them in their dishwasher on a rinse cycle. Some people
Okay, so she wants to know about sterilizing jars. If you use hot water in your sink and you use dish soap, you're sterilizing your jars. You can use your dishwasher. The thing you want to do is keep them warm. You don't want to let them cool off once you've got them washed. So I always either keep mine in a sink with a tea kettle full of boiling water, or I keep them in the canner while I'm preparing food and let the canner simmer with the rack up. So they're not necessarily in the water, but keep them hot. That's what you want to do. Once you've cleaned them properly, they're clean. You want to always make sure and clean this area here, and you want to always run your hands around there. The Tattlers you use just like The other ones, I put the rubber rings in boiling water. Some people will put them in a saucepan and simmer them. But yeah, everything should be heated, and that's because you never want to put a cold jar in boiling water because you know what's going to happen. It's not going to be pretty. I've only had one jar crack on me this year, and I should have known better because it was used. Like it was an old jar from somebody's basement. So eventually you have to give the jars up. And for Germans, that's really a hard thing to do. And you know what I'm saying, so.
Sue, I have two things. Could you clarify the hot pack, cold pack thing?
Okay.
And then the other thing is your beautiful coffee table German cookbook. Could you tell us
I
about
didn't bring a copy of dumb
that?
me.
If anybody ever sees that book, it is beautiful.
She first of all asked about the difference between hot pack, cold pack, okay? So a hot pack vegetable is exactly what it says. You warm it up in the liquid that you're canning with. And that's what I prefer. I hardly ever put cold food, and that's cold packing, cold food in my nicely warmed up jars. So what you do is you create your brine, your sweet juice if you're canning peaches or whatever. Then you put your peaches in that juice and warm everything up. When I'm doing salsa, I actually bring my salsa up to a boil. And then that's why, boy, these things are really handy to have, to fill your jars and not burn your hands. Although I'm going to share this with you, I'm actually a bread baker. One of the reasons I bake sourdough bread, and I've been doing it before it became a thing, because back in about 2013, I ran into a group down at the, it's called the Tri-County Tourism Alliance. I am from McIntosh County originally, and they decided to do this group to bring tourism down to the German-Russian culture. And I have always wanted to know things like, when you butcher, how do you keep your meat in the wintertime? How do you bake bread in a stove when you only got cow patties to keep it hot? And things like that. So I did research and I wrote a book. It's called Ewiger Satz, which is everlasting yeast, or actually sourdough starter. And everybody had it in their root cellar. All these little old ladies used to remember about drawing straws to see who would have to go into the creepy root cellar with those salamanders crawling out of the holes in the walls to get the starter up. But it's a coffee table book, and it is $75, which I know for a German was a lot of money to pay. But I created a lot of really wonderful memories, and I learned how to actually live without electricity, which was kind of the basis of the book. How do you feed your family without electricity? So if you're prepping, you may want to try to find a copy of that book and put it on your bookshelf, just in case you want to know these things. It's called Ewiger Satz, or Everlasting Yeast. And if you want to order it, you can from Dakota BookNet, or it's available at the Heritage Center. It's actually in its second printing. We printed 2,000 books and sold them all, and they decided to reissue the book again this year. It's beautiful because I'm a graphic artist at heart, and I love books. And so I made it as pretty as I possibly could. And sorry for the shameless plug, but she brought it up. So was there any other questions? I probably used up all my time. Oh, one more.
What inspiration do you use when heating water? If you live in town and you don't have well water, maybe that people.
Oh, she's asking me about water. That is a really good question because, boy, I have had some wonderful wild water in my days. And there's two things that affect your canning nowadays that changed when your grandparents were canning. That is the type of vegetables that we grow and the water. So I use distilled water all the time at 98 cents a jug. Well, provided that COVID doesn't come back in force, you can still buy water for 98 cents a jug, and that's what I use for all of my pickling and things like that. So, are we good? Are we good?
I got one more.
Oh, okay.
Believe it or not. When you put your jars in your can or your pressure
Okay.
cooker, did you say you had your water boiling or hot, or you had it cold? You start with what?
I don't start with cold water because I want everything to be warm. She asked about the water in the pressure canner. The one thing about the water in the pressure canner, first off, is that it's only a couple inches. Your canner instructions will tell you how much water to put in. But I actually start the burner so that that water is warm but not boiling when I put those jars in. Remember, cold glass, warm surface, bad. The thing about the baking I was going to mention real quick before I left is I touched a casserole dish in the oven at 500 degrees the other day when I was baking, and I was just like, I mean, it was painful, but I was waiting for it to blister and it didn't do anything. So that should tell you how many times I stuck my hand in a canner. All right, thank you. Oh, boy.